I'm thinking, I don't know what they're doing, and I feel like I'm getting too close. I'm going to hit them, and I just did something with the jet. I don't know what I did. For me, it was like survival, and not hit the other airplane and die. And he came back and he was congratulating me on what a beautiful counter roll, maneuver I did. And I went, oh yeah, I acted like I knew what the heck I was doing, but no, I was just trying not to hit your airplane and kill you.
Oh, that's cool.
And kill myself.
Welcome to Ordinary Joe's Extraordinary Stories, a podcast that shines a light on ordinary people and their extraordinary stories. From small towns to big cities, we're sharing the real, raw, and inspiring moments that connect us all. Because every voice matters. Every story counts. This is Ordinary Joe's Extraordinary Stories. Hello, Joes. Welcome back to another episode of Ordinary Joe's Extraordinary Stories. I'm your host, James Graves Brown, and I've got another special guest today. This guest means a lot to me. This is a very important one to me. I look up to this man a lot. He is actually, in a large way, responsible for me no longer being a nervous flyer, and he has only fed my av geekery. So I want everybody to give a warm welcome to Captain Jeff Neilsen. Captain Jeff, welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be here, James.
I appreciate you
looking
coming.
forward to this.
Good. Me too. I've been looking forward to it. I actually wanted to have you do this in the studio live, but you so far haven't made it out to my part of the country yet, and I'm looking forward to that. And when you do, we're going to have an in-studio podcast.
Okay.
But
Deal. I look forward to that.
This will work for now. So I want to start off by discussing how I met you and how you helped facilitate my overcoming of fear of flying. And you may not even know that you did that, but I met you because I wrote into your show after 2018 when I had a high-speed rejected takeoff in Florida. Sarah likes to joke that my brain hit the front of my head when the plane stopped and it messed something up in my brain. But I had to...
Oh, that's what the problem is.
Yeah. But I had to know everything there was to know about airplanes and how they work and all of that stuff. Well, so then I started researching what could have caused that. I didn't have a chance to ask the captain when we got off the plane or anything, and I was just grateful that he stopped because, who wants to be up in the air if the pilot's not confident? You sure as shit don't want to be in that airplane up in the air. So. Nope. I was just very grateful for that. But I started researching what could have been the cause. And, I never actually got an answer. But diving down that rabbit hole led me to your podcast. And I was building police vehicles at the time. So it was 8 hours of just me with my thoughts. And so I listened to your podcast religiously and just started learning more and more about airplanes, which led me to a rabbit hole of looking into airplane accidents. And oddly enough, looking into airplane accidents and learning all about how plane crashes happen and whatnot, it calmed me down, and it did the opposite of what you think it would do.
I think there are a lot of people like that out there, and as I say, knowledge is power. Now, I guess for some people, too much knowledge might be, a bad thing, but I think what you did, trying to understand the situation, and it just kind of, the same thing happens with me, and people express their fear of flying, especially when they experience turbulence and that kind of thing. And then when I explain to them what that's all about and why they shouldn't be concerned about it, as long as they take certain precautions and such, that you're fine. And people always, thank me for explaining it all, and they feel better. So, yeah. And I do remember that your situation and the whole thing, how you came to be a listener of the show. So. Yeah.
Well, then surprisingly to me, I had put out there that if any of you guys are going to be in the neighborhood, I'd love to meet you and have a drink with you. And surprisingly enough, a couple weeks later, you were in the neighborhood. So you and I went out and had some drinks and we talked. And through that conversation, I realized that if you as a pilot were making, 2, 3, 4, 5 trips a day across the country flying, for as many years as you were flying, and you didn't even have like the most crazy things happen to you. I'm like, what are the odds of something bad happening to me on an airplane? And it just almost instantly took away all of my fear of turbulence and all of my fear of like, I actually looked forward. I still haven't happened yet, but I look forward to a go around. Still haven't had that happen to me yet. But yeah, it's like it completely changed my mind on flying, and now I'm just a total av geek, and I love it.
Awesome.
So,
well, I'll take responsibility for that.
Absolutely, you are 100%,
or a part of it.
No, well, okay, we'll call it 80%. You're 80% responsible for that.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you. I do want to go back and talk a little bit about your childhood. Tell me where you grew up.
I was born in Long Beach, California, at St. Mary's Hospital. And let's see, lived the next couple, I guess my parents were living at the time in Lakewood, which is, near Long Beach. And then we moved to Los Alamitos, California, which is near Seal Beach and Huntington Beach and that kind of thing.
Cool.
I lived there until about 13. I think I made it to the first year of junior high school. And then my dad came home and said, family, we're going to be moving. We're going to move to Alabama.
No kidding.
And I said, I don't think I said this. I'm thinking, where the heck is Alabama? Because when you grow up in Southern California, you kind of wonder why anybody would live anywhere else.
Yeah.
Especially
I
back
understand.
in the 60s. I was born in the last part of the 50s.
Oh, come on. Quit trying to make yourself sound older.
Yeah, well, I was December of 58. So, so I kind of, my growing up years in California were in the 60s. And it was a great place to be in the 60s, that's for sure. And anyway, so I thought, okay, Alabama, I think that's near like Kansas or something, and something about a banjo on my knee, going to Alabama with a banjo on my knee.
That's great.
And so I looked at an atlas. We didn't have internet back then. So I looked at
hold on. You didn't have internet back then?
I know.
What did you do? How did you survive?
I know. It's crazy. The things that we have available to us today did not exist. Not everything. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, so I went, took out the atlas and tried to find Alabama. And then I went, oh, it's down there on the ocean. Well, my dad said, it's not really the ocean. It's the Gulf of Mexico. It's kind of like a big, giant, shallow pond. So, because I was just starting to learn how to surf at the time in Southern California, I had one of those big boards, and I said, "Oh, can I take my surfboard then, with us?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, but you're not going to see the kind of waves that you're used to seeing out here in the Pacific Ocean." So I did take it, and I actually ended up using it more like it looks like a big giant paddle, like a paddle board kind of thing. So I got some use out of it, but not a lot of wave action. So I never actually learned how to surf. I was just in the beginning stages of that when I was out there in California before we moved. So 13 years old, moved to Mobile, Alabama.
Oh, nice. I have a friend who lives there.
It's a great city to grow up in, your formative years or whatever. So went through middle school, high school, and then, one of the cool things is my dad ended up buying, he was a great outdoorsman, fisherman, hunter, all that kind of stuff. And he wanted to do some deep sea fishing, and he bought this boat that was kind of like a combination ski boat / you could take it out. It had like a deeper V in the middle. It was a cathedral hull, but you could take it out into the Gulf of Mexico. We go out, 25 miles or so, do trolling and that kind of thing, and that was a lot of fun. And then on the weekends, that's what we do on the weekends. Usually on Saturday and Sundays, usually after church, we put it into the Dog River the Fowl River, I think, is the one that we ended up usually putting the boat into, and then did a bunch of water skiing. So it was a great time to be growing up in Mobile and the water sports and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. And then, so I was very involved in music. I always have been in my life, and started learning how to play the piano. Took piano lessons, I think, starting when I was 5 or 6 years old. My mom started teaching me, and then I ended up going to a real teacher. And then I just started playing the trumpet when I was in California, and continued that through middle school and high school in Mobile. And basically, music was pretty much my life, playing in jazz bands and concert bands and marching bands and that kind of thing. And I really thought that that's what I was gonna do for a living.
So far in this conversation, it looks like you could have possibly been Surfer Jeff or musician Jeff, but you became Captain Jeff. That's wild.
So many different things I could have been.
All the Jeffs.
So at the same time, even when I was a kid in California, looking up, and there's a lot of traffic that is going overhead. One of the busiest airspace spaces in the country, or in the world, for that matter. And I used to look up and think, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to fly airplanes.
No kidding.
That was kind of a dream too. So, and we go to the airport, take family and friends and pick them up at the airport. And I just loved the smell of burnt jet fuel, and, just captivated by the whole idea of traveling to, exotic places in the world and that kind of thing. So that was kind of another passion that I had inside of me. But yeah. So when I was really deep into music in high school and looking at different colleges to get a music degree and all that kind of stuff, I started realizing, as we all do, I think, as we get to a certain age, we start realizing, or getting closer to adulthood, that you have to start thinking about the practicalities of the job that you might go into or choose, as far as paying bills and all these things that are kind of foreign to us when we're just kids and we're being taken care of by our mom and dad.
Right.
And I realized that, well, if I want to fly, that's an expensive kind of hobby. And I'm thinking, if I stay in music, as much as I want to be like a studio musician or a famous solo trumpeter or something like that, I knew that the chances of that happening were, like minuscule.
Sure.
And I'd probably be a band director, which would be very rewarding, but it wouldn't give me the kind of compensation, the kind of salary that I'd really need to go, on the weekends, go to the airport and the flight school and rent an airplane and do all that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what if I turn that whole equation upside down and I end up being a pilot for a living? And then I could do music on the side as a hobby. So that's essentially what ended up happening. But there was a little bit of a bump in the road because at the time, in the mid to late 70s, the guys and gals that were being hired by the major airlines, and because I wanted to fly for one of the big ones, were military trained, or mostly military service kind of experiences. And I just the idea of being in the military was not something that I was wanting to entertain. I didn't know anything about the military at all. My dad, I think it was in during the Korean conflict, but he was in Germany. So he wasn't actually in war at all. But during that war, he served 4 years in Germany. Wow. And that's the only exposure that my family, the only kind of military experience that my family had. So I knew nothing about the military. I pictured that I'd be,
I was just going to interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry, but you were a very wise young man. The things that you were thinking about versus the things I was thinking about at that age were significantly different, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, I think I'm lucky that I was thinking that way, because I could have easily have been just not thinking about or planning or having any ambition at all, But
of course.
I don't know why or how that was instilled into me, but I guess my parents just, basically expected me to, after high school, I'd go to college and do this and that. And, anyway, so getting back to the military thing, the only thing I knew about the military was what I saw in movies. And I'm thinking, okay, if I go into the military, I'm going to have to live in the barracks and eat in the mess hall. And I didn't realize that, to be a pilot in the military, you have to have a this is mostly true for all the services. There are some exceptions, but you have to have a college degree, and you're an officer. You have to be an officer. And so I'm thinking, okay. And then I learned, it turns out that it's more like a regular job where you can live in base housing, or they give you an allowance to live off a base, and live mostly a normal life, except that occasionally, depending on what kind of airplane you're flying, people might be shooting at you. But other than that, it was pretty much a normal kind of job. But I didn't know that at the time. So I thought, as I go off to college, I think, maybe being an airline pilot's not something that is going to work out for me. So I, through the advice of my parents and my dad's friends who were in business, said you should get an engineering degree and then get an MBA and you'll be all set. So off I go to Georgia Tech here in Atlanta. Nice. And that was my starter year of college, I call it, my freshman year. I was an information and computer science major, the basic.
You're ahead of your time.
Engineering. Yeah. Well, I mean, now let me say that back then, this is 1977, 78. The being in computer science wasn't playing on your IBM, personal PC kind of thing. It's like you go to the computer center, which is like an entire city block building. I think Georgia Tech had one of the handful of Cray supercomputers at the time. By the way, this iPhone that probably what you're using right now and what I'm holding up right here is so much more powerful than that computer that took up an entire city block. It is wild. But so the punch cards, and you give the punch cards, a stack of punch cards to the lady at the window, and then about an hour or so later, you go to the other side of the building and another window, and then they have these stacks of, these green, dark green, light green striped pieces of paper that the printout comes out on as far as what you were trying to do with the supercomputer.
Wow.
So I learned Pascal, COBOL, Fortran, BASIC, all the not machine languages, but the big kind of computer languages. Wow. And I realized, this is no fun. I don't like this at all. And then the engineering courses were kicking my butt, like hard. In high school, I thought I was really smart. I was like top 10 graduating class out of like 550. I was the outstanding senior in mathematics. I got that special award. I'm thinking, I'm pretty something, Yeah. And I went to Georgia Tech, and during my orientation, I realized, you're pretty something, all right. You're down in the bottom 25% of the freshman class, because we took a battery of tests, and I went, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. I'm not all that. And it was a struggle in engineering at Georgia Tech. And I thought, I started feeling bad because my parents were paying out-of-state tuition. It's a lot of money for them. I'd say our socioeconomic class at the time was like middle class. So they could afford it, but it was a stretch. And I felt bad because I was just barely making passing grades there. And I said, hey, Mom, Dad, let's think about this. Why don't I transfer over to Auburn University in Alabama? So that's in-state tuition. Save you guys a lot of money. Yeah. I think I'm going to be happier there anyway. And it's still got a great engineering curriculum. Sure. And so I ended up going there and transferring to electrical engineering. Now, if I had any sense, I would have realized that electrical engineering is like one of the hardest engineering curriculums that you can possibly choose. And again, I started, I was hitting myself or hitting my head against the brick wall, trying to understand these things. This just stuff wasn't coming to me easily, which I wasn't used to. I was used to things coming to me easily, and this was really hard. And I finally thought to myself, I can't imagine myself, if somehow I make it through this program and graduate as an engineer with an engineering degree, what am I going to do? I don't think I'm going to like this job for a living. I want to fly airplanes, damn it.
Yeah.
And so I ended up finally making a good decision in college by transferring to aviation management at Auburn University.
Oh, wow.
And I realized that a lot of the guys that were in aviation management there were ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, the program that they have to kind of help students become officers,
Sure.
Learn leadership skills and that kind of thing. So that when they graduate, if they're in the ROTC program, they graduate as second lieutenants.
Wow.
I didn't want to, but a lot of my friends were in the curriculum that were in ROTC, and they kept getting jacked around. Like one week they'd have a pilot slot, the next week they'd go, well, we don't think we're going to be able to give you a pilot slot. And I'm thinking,
oh, geez.
I don't want to do this
That's
for the next couple of years. Yeah, and then find out I don't have a pilot slot, and I don't want to play Army unless I know that this is going to be
Sure.
a worthwhile thing for me. So I did my own research and found that the military services, when I graduate in 1981, are going to be in need of pilots. They're going to have a shortage of pilots. And so I went to the recruiter in nearby Opelika, Alabama, and said, what do I need to do to get into officer training school after I graduate here? And he said, well, you go back over to Auburn to the ROTC building and you take these tests, the Air Force Officer Trainee Quotient tests or something like that.
Okay.
And you take those tests and then they grade them and they determine whether or not you're, the proper kind of material to become a pilot in the Air Force. And so a couple of weeks later, my recruiter called me up and said, hey, you got the test back. He said, you did well. He said, you really did well in the navigator portion. And he said, so I'm proposing that we submit your application as a pilot or navigator. And I went, nah, I don't think so. And he goes, well, no, I mean, if they choose you as a navigator, it's really easy to go from a navigator to a pilot in the Air Force.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's not true.
No?
That's not true. And I went, I don't know. It's just something my intuition told me. Yeah, this is not what I want to do. I want to be a pilot. So just submit me as a pilot. If they turn me down, then we'll talk and see what to do next. So he submitted my application. I was accepted. So after I graduated in 1981 from Auburn, I was flying down to San Antonio, Texas to go to officer training school. And then after that, pilot training in the Air Force. And then another 6 years later, after I got my wings, I was out. So
that's awesome.
I know you're probably, I'm not letting you get a word in edgewise, James.
No. This is good stuff. I want to hear about what your training as a pilot was in the military and what jets you flew.
Okay. So when you go to, at the time, it's changed a little bit since then. After I got out of the Air Force in the late 80s, they started transitioning to what they call a dual track kind of program. So the pilots that were more suited for, let's say, transport, bomber, tanker, kind of bigger airplanes, went through a different track after the initial part of your pilot training, your general learning how to fly jets. And now it's not even a jet. It's a turboprop aircraft. That's primary trainer. And you learn formation and aerobatics and navigation and that kind of thing, the basics of flying jets or high-performance airplanes. And then now they go off into like a business jet kind of thing. The guys are going to go in that kind of world. And then the pilots that are going to be flying fighters, attack aircraft, reconnaissance aircraft, the more high-performance things that you can fly. Then they go to the T-38, which is the advanced jet trainer. Awesome. When I went through, we all went through the basic jet trainer, which was the T-37. And then we went to the advanced training, which is the T-38 Talon, a supersonic trainer. And and the entire time you're in, that was probably the hardest year of my life because absolutely everything you do is being judged, graded. Your performance is always being, critiqued. And I would go in sometimes just hoping that the weather was going to be bad so that we wouldn't have to fly. It was not. Now, I'm not saying that I'm the typical student there that felt that way, but I know there were others that felt that way as well. But I just was not having fun, James. I hated it, but I knew that I had to do this. Because this is part of my, one of the puzzle pieces. I got to get this. I got to get my wings. I need to, and I'm thinking at the time, I need to fly one of the big giant airplanes, like one of the transport airplanes, because that's what the airlines are going to want, right?
Yeah.
I was wrong about that. I come to find out later, many years later, that's not true at all. But anyway, so I did. I was what you'd call probably just a solid average performer in, above average, but I mean, consistent, I guess is what I mean. I wasn't the one that would come back with a check ride getting excellent. The rating system was like excellent, good, fair, and then poor, I think, and then unsat. I think I got that right. And I never got an unsat on any of my rides or check rides. I never, but I didn't get any excellence either in any of my check rides. I was just a solid good, above average.
What dictates those scores? Like, what are they looking for specifically? Like, if you fly the plane and you land it, isn't that a good thing?
There is like a list of things that for every sortie that you go out on, there are all these things that you have to accomplish, and each one is graded. And it's just a standard curriculum, depending if it's a contact sortie, which is you go out and you do aerobatics and that kind of thing, or if it's a formation sortie, and these things are judged. And
okay,
it's just it's amazing. As I said, everything is being evaluated the entire time you're there. And I didn't like that. That was the thing. I just hated being under the microscope constantly.
I understand that pressure is a lot.
A lot of stress. A lot of stress.
Real quick.
They say, I don't know if,
I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I somebody had told me or read somewhere. They said that that 1 year of military pilot training is more stressful than like med school, law school, all these things. Now, of course, that's usually spread out among several years, right? But
wow.
The military training supposedly was much more intense and stressful than any other kind of training out there. And I would say I agree. And during this time, as I said, everything is being judged. Everything is being, you're being ranked among your class. I would say that about, not quite, but almost half of the people that started out in my pilot training class ended up either self-eliminating or got eliminated during the training program. So it was a very competitive environment. And I think we ended up graduating with about 30-something, I think, pilots in my class, 8303. Anyway, what happens is at the latter portion of your pilot training, when you're in the T-38 supersonic trainer, the instructors there are starting to really, really focus on, okay, Jeff, what kind of pilot, what kind of airplanes would he be suited to fly? And so one of the things they determine is if you are FAR qualified. FAR, we said, FARD is what the term was that we used, fighter attack reconnaissance aircraft. So you have the ability, the skills to fly something high performance. And I'd say probably at that time, maybe 25, 30% of the class about were in that category. And then of that number, then they'd say, okay, not only can this person fly these high performance airplanes, can they instruct other people? Can they teach? Are they that, have that kind of personality? And so a subset of that FAR qualification is instructor qualified, or so is like FAR IP qualified. And so I was in that group, FAR IP qualified. Wow. And so I knew that I knew that I wasn't like the top dog of the class, always getting these excellence for my evaluations for like check rides and stuff. And so I knew that the writing was on the wall for me. I was going to be coming back as a FAPE, which is a first assignment instructor pilot. In other words, you graduate and then they send you to pilot instructor training, and then you come back and now you're going to teach the people that are coming in, just as you did a little over a year before. And then getting close to assignment night, and you put I think it's called a dream sheet, or I can't remember the term now. But you can.
I just did a podcast. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but I just did a podcast yesterday with my good friend Dustin, and he was in the Navy, and he had the same thing. They had a dream sheet too. Okay,
so maybe that's what it was. And a lot of these terms are like failing me now because I'm old. That was a long time ago. That was the early '80s. Before the turn of the century. And so you put down what your choices are. But for me, it was like, I want to fly the C-141 because, again, thinking that I got to fly these big, heavy airplanes with crews to be something that the airlines would want. And but I'm thinking, I know that I'm coming back as a T-37 instructor pilot. I mean, they've told me that that's what is going to happen with me. So just a few days before assignment night, my student commander, student squadron commander, a captain, a real officer. I mean, I was a real officer too. I was a second lieutenant, so you know what I mean. This guy was not. He was one of the instructors, but he was also in charge of the entire class. He calls me up and he goes, "Hey, Jeff," he said, "what are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're getting ready for stand-up," which is, what we do in the mornings or the afternoons, depending on whether we're late or early shift, where we, have a squadron meeting, and it's hard to describe. But anyway, I said, "We're about to do that," and he goes, "Well, hey, come out and meet me between the squadron buildings, really quick." And I went, "Well, okay." And so I went out there, and he goes, "Hey, what do you want to, assignment night's coming up here pretty quickly." He said, what is it you want to fly? What do you want for an assignment?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be coming back as a FAPE." And he goes, "No, if there's anything that you'd want to do and want to fly, what would it be?" And I said, "Well, the C-141, Starlifter, it would be my first choice." And he goes, "Yeah," he said, "that's mine too." And he said, "I'll probably see you out there in about a year."
No kidding.
And I went, I'm looking at him like, what is he saying to me? I'm not understanding the words that are coming from his mouth. And so I went, and he goes, "Okay," saluted and told me to get back to the squadron for stand up. And so what happened, I guess, is because of my consistency throughout the entire year, both the basic jet training and then the advanced jet training, I ended up getting in what they call the distinguished graduate category, where it's like the top 10% of your class. And for us, it was 3 of us.
Dang.
And so I don't know exactly where I was probably the 3rd, the number 3 guy.
That's bragging rights.
But I was pretty happy with getting that accomplishment. And then
That's incredible.
People said, "Well, you could fly anything. You could fly the F-15. These are the airplanes, the hot airplanes everybody was wanting to fly. F-15, F-16, A-10, RF-4, reconnaissance F-4." And they said, but you put down a 141. Why? And I explained, well, I think it's because the airlines really love that kind of experience. And I went, well, okay, whatever. Now, I look back now and thinking, now I know what I know, because you don't know what you know until you don't know.
Until you know.
Until you know. But it turns out I could have flown the F-15, F-16, A-10, any of these things. But you know what? Honestly, if I had to do it all over again, and I knew that going into it, I probably still would have picked the C-141, because that allowed me to fly. I've just always loved big airplanes, an airliner kind of airplane.
I understand.
And it also, the traveling was amazing. I got to see, I just counted it up not long ago, how many countries that I've been to in this world. And it's, for a lot of people, it's not a big deal. The number is not a huge number. But from what I can tell, about 21 different countries, including the U.S. And most of those, especially in the Pacific, because I was based on the west coast of California when I was flying the C-141, most of those are like Asian countries, like the Philippines and Japan, so cool. Korea, Singapore, Thailand, that kind of thing.
That's so cool.
But yeah, and honestly, if it weren't for the fact that I was flying that airplane in the Air Force, I probably never would have had the opportunity to see many of those or any of those countries. So it was a wonderful thing.
If you had chosen the F-15 or F-16 or something like that, what would have been the difference? Like, what would have been your timeline after picking one of those?
Yeah, well, you'd go into, just like all the airplanes, you go to a follow-on training after you graduate that focuses specifically on the jet that you're going to be assigned. So if you're going to go into the fighter world, then you go to, well, at the time, I don't know if this is still true. What do they call that? Fighter upgrade training? I can't think of the term now, but okay. You go to like one of the bases in Arizona, I believe. Again, this may all have changed since my day in the Air Force, but you learn, because I think a lot of what you would learn at this kind of extra training after you graduate from undergraduate pilot training, you go to graduate school in flying high performance airplanes, and you learn fighter battle, what do they call it, techniques, maneuvers for doing the things that you would do in combat, air to air and that kind of thing.
Right.
So you do. I think that's another at least 6 months to a year. But now I think a lot of the advanced jet training that you do in undergraduate pilot training, for the ones that are going to go into that world of high performance jets, they kind of give you a lot of those techniques and skills and training while you're still in undergraduate pilot training. Whereas when I went through, they didn't. Very basic fighter, BFM, maybe basic fighter maneuvering. I think that's the term. Anyway, I learned a little bit of it. We do the thing that was the scariest to me, and the multiple times that I thought I wasn't going to live through the sortie, was four-ship formation in the T-38, going up and doing extended trail, which means that you're in formation, and then the lead, tells everybody we're going to go extended trail, and then he or she peels off. And then, I forgot how many seconds later, how many potatoes you count, the next jet does the same, and then the next jet does the same, and the next jet. So there's like a built-in amount of space based on the timing of, when you peel off out of the formation. And the lead starts doing these maneuvers like loops and Immelmans and barrel rolls, which is the one that always scared the what out of me, because especially if you were like number 3 or number 4 in this thing. So you see all these little jets ahead of you, and they're all kind of going upside down like they're flying on the inside of the barrel.
Damn, that's cool.
And you're trying to maintain your position. The deal is everybody go to military power, which is full power without afterburner. And so everybody's at the same power setting. So the way that you manage your position when you're doing extended trail in formation is by positioning the airplane, your nose position, and getting cut off or increasing or decreasing cutoff, so that you can maintain your position and not hit another airplane. And that whole darn time doing extended trail is like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to hit this airplane, especially during the barrel roll. That was always the tricky one for me. I remember once I came back from a sortie. It was just a 2-ship, and I was solo on the wing of my instructor and the other student that he had with him, and that we were doing extended trail. And again, I'm thinking, I don't know what they're doing, and I feel like I'm getting too close. I'm going to hit them, and I just did something with the jet. I don't know what I did. For me, it was like survival, and not hit the other airplane and die. And he came back, and he was congratulating me on what a beautiful counter roll maneuver I did. And I went, oh yeah,
totally meant to
I
do
acted
that.
like I knew what the heck I was doing, but no, I was just trying not to hit your airplane and kill you.
Oh, that's cool.
And kill myself. Anyway.
Good instincts.
So that was a lot of fun. The training, I'm so glad now, looking back, that I made the decision to be trained by the military, and to get into the military and go through pilot training in the Air Force was like, wow, there's just things that I would never have been able to experience otherwise.
That's really cool.
It was just super top-notch training, and and to this day, I kind of realize that, I mean, from the very first time you get in the jet, you're learning unusual attitude situations and unusual attitude recoveries. And we've had some major airliner accidents in the last couple of decades where the pilots lost control of an airplane when it got into an unusual attitude situation. And I'm thinking, I'm glad that I have this training, because if I ever find myself upside down and nose really low or nose high, whatever, I almost instinctively know how to maneuver the airplane to get it out of that. And not everybody has that opportunity to have that kind of training.
Oh, and it's only getting worse.
I know. It is.
More reliance on technology, less on flying the jet.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Oh, don't get me started on that, James.
Oh, I know.
Don't get me started. It's really, really sad. I mean, technology is a wonderful thing, and and there are a lot of safety enhancements with it. But on the other hand, the other side of the coin, which you just mentioned, is the fact that it's getting so good and so reliable that you become so dependent upon it, and then when you lose it, or if it starts doing something it's not supposed to do, it's like, oh, what do I do now? And if you were brought up in the world of basic flying and instrument flying skills, and with a 6-pack, which is the way the individual instruments are laid out on your instrument panel when you're, I didn't have GPS and RNAV and all these moving map displays, none of that. You had to use your brain, what I like to say, your pilot brain, to look at an instrument and see, okay, this thing is pointing, to the 8 o'clock position of a clock, and the DME, the distance measuring equipment, is saying like 5.5. So it's like, okay, the navigational aid that I'm tuned into, and it's pointing back behind me at 8 o'clock, and it says 5.5 miles. So now I know I'm building this map in my brain to figure, to keep my situational awareness. Now it's just like you just look down and there's a map. And there you are, right there on the map. Like, it's almost like here you are, like when you go to the mall and you try to figure out where the store is that you're trying to get to,
on
and
the big billboard.
Like, you are here.
So that's wild. And you would think that would be such an easy way to understand things, and still events happen because just too much reliance. That's insane. Too much reliance
on it, and it's the new generation of pilots. It's not their fault. That's just that's how they're cutting their teeth now. That's what they're learning, and they don't. It's just very rare if they ever get a chance. Maybe they get a brief exposure to it at the very beginning of their flight training in their careers of the basics, like the old days, the old school kind of methods that we used. But I grew up in that world, and I'm so blessed that I did, that I have that skill set. That's the way I learned to fly. And then now, with all the advanced technology, it's like, okay, it's easy to figure out all these things without really thinking about it too much. But
real quick, I had a question before we get way too far. You said at Auburn you went into aviation management. What did that entail? What was involved in aviation management?
So so they had aviation management, and they also had something called the professional flight options, which was like, also you could go out to the Auburn Opelika Airport and fly in single engine propeller airplanes like Cessnas and that kind of stuff, and actually learn how to fly a real airplane. And it was kind of expensive, and so for two different reasons, I did not enroll in the professional flight option. Number one, it was expensive, and I already felt guilty about my parents spending money on me for all of this stuff. And the other thing is that when I determined that how I'm going to get from point A to point B, from here to the airlines eventually, a number of years later, it's going to be through the military. And so once I made that decision, it was a no-brainer. I'm thinking, I don't have to pay anybody any money for my flight training. In fact, they're going to be paying me to learn how to fly. So I just did the regular aviation management curriculum. And at that time, I don't think that's the case anymore, but at Auburn at the time, the aviation management program was under the umbrella of the School of Engineering. So my degree is a Bachelor of Science in aviation management. Now, I think the guys and gals that go through aviation management now, it's under the what it was, a BA, I think, and because it's like a hybrid kind of a curriculum that's a little bit of like light engineering stuff. You learn drafting and you learn mechanical engineering, like statics and dynamics and that kind of thing, which I really enjoyed. Mostly the statics. I really enjoyed, like figuring out compression and tension, like those bridges that, figuring all that stuff out. It was pretty cool. But also at the same time, you're going to like accounting and economics courses, which, like I know math, but that ain't math. I don't know what it is, but it was hard and I didn't like it. And, but like business related kind of stuff.
Okay.
So it's kind of a hybrid business/engineering degree, and with the focus on learning things about managing aviation, like being an airport manager or fixed base operator, FBO, kind of, thing. It's not aerospace engineering. That's entirely, that's like a real engineering degree where you learn about aerodynamics and fluid dynamics and all these, really hard things. Whereas aviation management was just kind of, as I said, like light engineering and light business. And yeah. What do you do with that? I don't know. I guess I could become a airport manager somewhere.
You show a piece of paper to somebody and you get a job. That's what you do with it.
So exactly. So for me, it was like, okay, I know I have to be a pilot in the military. That's what I need to do to become an airline pilot eventually. So to be a pilot, I have to be an officer. To be an officer, you have to have a college degree. So that's the way it worked for me. It was just checking boxes, and if I really when I recommend people or give advice to people when it comes to going to college or not, and until recently, the airlines require, or most of the big airlines required, and maybe they still not really require it, but they still prefer it. Someone with a college degree, they don't necessarily expect you to have like an engineering degree. They just want you to have a college degree. It's like just showing that you have ambition to get to check that box.
Sure.
Right? And what I tell people now is that if you're going to get a college degree, get it in something that is your plan B, your backup plan.
Oh, that's good.
In case, something happens with your health, something, maybe you just don't really have the skills to fly airplanes.
That's good advice.
Or maybe the job environment, or like the hiring environment is like, really bad, and they're furloughing people, and because that's the cycle in aviation, especially airlines. It's really, really good, and they're hiring people like crazy, and then it goes down, and it gets down really bad where they're furloughing people, and airlines are going out of business and that kind of thing. So it's like this big cycle constantly, and so I'm thinking. I tell people, get something, what you're interested in other than aviation. Get your degree in that, because now you have a backup plan, right?
Yeah, that's solid.
So I didn't have that philosophy at the time. I was under a number of misperceptions and assumptions that were not right.
It all
worked out.
Yeah, it worked out for you, so that's what matters. All right, let's talk about the transition from the military to the airlines, and then a little bit about your airline career.
Okay. So I flew the 141 for a couple of years, and then I got a letter when I was there at Travis Air Force Base that said, "Oh, Captain Neilsen, we are considering candidates to come back to the Air Training Command to be instructor pilots." And I'm thinking, no. I thought that when I left the Air Force Base, the training base, and I saw in my rearview mirror that was the last time I was going to see an Air Training Command base. And because I dodged that bullet, I didn't have to be an instructor pilot. Yay, I get to fly like airplanes and real missions and that kind of thing. And then I get this letter, and I'm going, well, dang, I don't want to do that. I was already dodging that bullet, I thought. So I went to the executive officer of the squadron and said, and I went into his office and I put that piece of paper on his desk. I said, I don't want to do this. And they said, well, Jeff, unfortunately, in the past we had the ability to say, no, we don't want to release this guy to Air Training Command, but they are so. Their emphasis, their push is so much on trying to get people that are out there in the real world of military flying, that have major weapons system identifiers, I think it was the term, that to come back into the training environment, because the instructors that they had in undergraduate pilot training mostly were people that had just learned how to fly, had gotten their wings, and then come right back, and now they're teaching the new people, kind of like what happens right now. And if you go to like get a CFI, a commercial or certified flight instructor rating, as part of your career advancement, then almost immediately you've gone from student to instructor, and now you're instructing all the other people coming in.
And these instructors so
you build your time.
These instructors only have a couple hundred hours under the belt, right?
Yeah,
that's
not a
wild.
lot of experience.
That's wild.
Yeah, but it works. But and the Air Force really, I have to say, loved it, because these guys, when they come back as instructor, first assignment instructor pilots, they don't have an assignment yet. They are still competing against each other the next 3-4 years to get that fighter or to get that whatever airplane it is they want to fly, and this base that they want to fly at. So they're working their asses off, and the Air Force appreciates the fact that these guys are still competing, and they're getting a lot of performance and a lot of use out of them. Guys like me who come back. Well, I'm kind of jumping the shark here. But the guys and gals out there that come back from major weapon systems, fighters, tankers, bombers, transports, to be instructor pilots, they now have that experience that the FAPEs don't have. So we have real world experience, and it's always been a certain balance of FAPEs and real world experienced people, and it was just starting to get so out of whack that there were just so many FAPEs and very little real world experienced people as instructor pilots, that somebody higher up in Air Training Command said, look, we need to get a bunch of these people back here to kind of get this balanced out better. And so that happened to be the time frame where I got my letter. And so my executive officer said, sorry, Jeff, that's the only thing that's going to keep, we can't say, nope, we're not going to release him. The only thing that you can do, and there were 3 things, and I still to this day can't remember the third one, but the first one was you can go out and fail a check ride. So in the next, we were constantly having check rides. And so you could actually purposely bust. I think they called it a Q3. Q1 is like you passed, you're solid. Q2 is like, you're kind of passed, but you didn't do really great. But Q3 is like, that's
absolutely
like
not.
unsat. Absolutely not. You're gonna have to do that again. So, and that's on your record. I mean, it's not a good thing to have on your record.
Yeah.
And I have a friend. Well, he was a friend at the time, an acquaintance, let's say, who was a great pilot. And he went up on his local, training check ride or periodic check ride or whatever. And one of the requirements of the 141 when you come in for a visual approach is when you fly over the fence, over the beginning of the runway, you're required, unless the instrument procedure that you're using allows for something less than 50 feet, you're required to cross the fence at 50 feet above the ground. He comes in, flying his 141, 40 feet on the radio altitude, and makes a beautiful touchdown, everything else. And the evaluator says, hey, John, let's call him. Nice approach, nice landing, but you're 10 feet too low. You have to be at least 50 feet above the fence when you cross. And he goes, all right, yes, sir. Comes around, guess what? 40 feet.
Oh, geez. Again.
Does it a third time. Come around, 40 feet. Boom. And the guy goes, well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to give you a Q3. I'm going to have to hook you on this check ride. And he goes, well, you got to do what you got to do. Well, he did that because he knew that was going to take him out of the running to come back to be an instructor pilot in Air Training Command. I couldn't do that, James. It's like I just have this personal pride that I couldn't purposely.
Well, sure, if it's going on your record, like that's a big deal. I wouldn't want that on my record.
The other thing that's on your record is every year you go through an officer evaluation, what they call OER, officer evaluation report. I think now they call them OPR, officer performance report. That's what they use to determine, advancing in rank in your career. And there are several things involved with that, but one of them is that yearly evaluation that your supervisor does on you. Honestly, what happens is they tell you, "Hey, Jeff, your OER is coming up. Can you go ahead and write your OER and then hand it to me?" And then they kind of make some changes and then they sign it. But that's a little secret there. But anyway, the executive officer said, "Jeff, you can get a bad OER," and I went, "Well, no, I can't do that. I mean, what if when it's time for me to get out of the military and the airlines aren't hiring, and now I have a bad OER, which means that I can only make it to a certain rank, and at some point they're going to go, well, you didn't make rank, Jeff, so you're out." I can't do that. So I thought, okay, that's the second thing. Again, I can't remember what the third thing was, but they're all just as unpalatable. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be going back to the Air Training Command and being an instructor pilot. And so that's what I did. So I did that for my last 4 years in the Air Force at Columbus Air Force Base, the same place that I learned, how to fly jets in the Air Force, Columbus, Mississippi.
So you were 6 years in the military?
Well, so a total of a little over 7. So I went through officer training school and then a year of pilot training. And then once I got my wings, another 6. At that time, it was a required commitment of 6 years after wings. Oh, wow. Then it wasn't long after that. It was like 8 and then 10. I mean,
holy cow.
The military kept thinking, well, we keep losing all these guys to the airline, so we need to get them over the hump of that 20-year career, right? So they kept upping the requirement for if you get wings and we spend all this money on you, then we require that you spend this much time in the active military. Oh, sure. As a side note, when I was in officer training school at the Medina Annex in San Antonio, Texas, back in 1981, I met this guy, became my best friend at the time. And he was from Atlanta, and his dad was a Delta Airlines captain, and that's what he wanted to do too. And that's why we became such good friends, because that's what I wanted to do. And he talks about the fact that he's in the reserves at Dobbins Air Force Base in Atlanta. And I go, "Reserves? Well, what's that?" And he goes, "Oh," he said, "Well," and he explained to me, "Well, I can, I have a commitment, but it's not like a active duty commitment. I can get my training, the same training that that you're going to get. I'm going to be assigned to my unit, and they fly a specific airplane, the C-130 of this unit, and cool. And then whenever I have the requirements that the airlines require, I can go ahead and fly for the airlines." And I said, "At the same time, you're still in the reserve unit?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I went, "Oh, that's what I want to do." And he goes, "Well, sorry, Jeff, you already raised your hand. You already signed the paperwork. You're active duty, and there's no way you can get out of that." And I went, "Oh." So I didn't know about the reserves. I didn't know about the Guard and the Air National Guard. I wish I had. Now I advise people that are requesting my advice. If you want to get the best training possible, military training, try to find an Air National Guard unit or a reserve unit, and sign up with them, and they'll give you all the training you need, and then you have the ability to get. So this guy, we were, in officer training school together at the same time. He got hired by Delta like about 2.5 years before I was able to get out of the service and become a pilot for Delta. That, you wouldn't think that that's a lot of time, but if the airline is in a big hiring binge or whatever, they're really hiring like gangbusters. Yeah. The seniority difference between his number and my number is huge. I mean, really? He was always way ahead of me, and good for him. I wish that I'd known about this whole system and how it could have benefited me, but whatever. I still feel like I'm very, very blessed that I was in the Air Force when I was in the 1980s, mostly during the Reagan administration when things were going like gangbusters in the military and things were getting better and better and better and pay was getting higher, and it was just a good time to be in the military.
That's great.
And then I got hired when there was a big hiring boom. And so, I never had, in my airline career, I never had to worry about being, I worried about it, but I never was furloughed when things started going downhill.
Also good news.
I was always I had enough people behind me to kind of cushion me and prevent me from having, I did endure stagnation in my progress in my career, but I always had a job. I never lost my job. So I'm so pleased that it worked out that way. It's all about timing, really.
Sure.
So, yeah. So I got out in I got hired by Delta in December of 1988. And then for the next 35 years,
That's
when I turned,
cool.
because I turned 30 years old in my initial training at Delta. At the time, the retirement age for airline pilots in the U.S. was 60 was retirement age. And it wasn't but a few years later that the FAA bumped up the requirement or the maximum age to 65. So I turned 30, and then 35 years later, without screwing anything up, getting in trouble, and managing to get a medical certificate every year or twice a year toward the end. As long as you are able to do that, you have a job, and you have a job with a great company. And so 35 years at
That's
Delta,
so awesome.
and it was a great career. Started off as a 727 flight engineer.
Okay. Oh,
No,
wow.
flight
You were
engineer.
an engineer.
Yeah, because it's a three-person.
Yeah.
Now, not all the airlines did it, but a lot of them did, like American, United, Delta, where that was your starting position in the 727.
Oh, wow.
You were sitting sideways, we call it, on the panel. You learn all kinds of things about the systems of these airplanes because you were the system manager. And so you were the one responsible for making sure the fuel was flowing from this tank to the engines and everything else, and getting the generators and stuff online. And it was not an automatic process back then. It was like you were dialing in this thing, and you're watching these lights flashing, and then at a certain point they're all synced up, and then you hit the switch, and then you bring the generator online. It's like crazy old school kind of stuff.
I can't believe 3 people fit in that cockpit.
Yeah. It was comfortable. It was long. It was narrow. If you've been in a 737 or 727 cockpit, it's not a super wide cockpit like the Lockheed jets or the Airbuses for that matter. But so I did that for a year and a half. I could have upgraded about the year point to be first officer on the DC-9, but and keep this in mind, that was an airplane I was never going to fly.
Why is that?
It turns out that the DC-9, but it turns out that most of my career, most of my flying time is in a variant of a DC-9.
Yeah.
But again, so that's one of those, you hear this all the time, never say never. But anyway, so I skipped going to school on the, be a first officer on the DC-9 because I knew that if I just waited a little bit longer, I could just go straight from the flight engineer seat to the right seat, the first officer's seat on the 727. And I hate training, and I hate the box, is what we call the simulator. People think that, we have so much fun in the simulator. We do not have fun in the simulator.
Wait.
It's horrible.
No.
Yeah, because so when you go into the box, James, you're having fun.
It was
flying
fun. It was
under bridges and between between buildings and doing all kinds of fun stuff.
I did none of that.
No, I was constantly being evaluated. Again, back to the evaluation stress and all that kind of stuff. And
Okay, I can see
anyway.
that.
Yeah, so for me, staying out of that schoolhouse as much as I could was my goal, and so I went. I could just move up. I already know the systems of this airplane. Now I just have to learn how to fly it. And it looks like, from sitting back here, it looks like it's a pretty easy jet to fly. Let me tell you what. back in the day when we had airplanes that had 3 crew members up in front, being a first officer in a 3-pilot crew airplane is the best job ever. You may not be getting paid as much as the guy sitting in the left seat, the captain, but it doesn't matter because you're basically in semi-retirement. You don't do any walk-arounds. You don't. I think we read one checklist, like the pre-flight checklist. You either fly this leg or you talk on the radio for this leg, and that's it. No responsibilities. You're just the first officer. You just get to fly or talk on the radio. That's it. That's all. It's even better when you go to training. They don't expect the first officer to really know anything. I mean, the basics, the boldface and all the, the system limitations and that kind of thing. But other than that, so you're sitting there with a captain in your check ride in the simulator or in the briefing room before you go down to the box. And the guy's asking all these questions, and then you're kind of answering. If you hesitate at all, then they go, "Well, Bob, help Jeff out there. What is it?" So the focus is on the captain. Captain has to know everything, and the first officer is just not really expected to know anything but boldface and limitations and that kind of thing. Honestly. Yeah, I realized that right away. My first simulator check ride was like, wow, I really way overprepared for this check ride because I really didn't have to do anything. And then it even gets better when you get into the box and things start going wrong, because that's what happens on these check rides in the simulator. Right. Something is going to go wrong, and you're going to have some kind of an abnormal procedure that you'll have to run, or an emergency checklist or whatever. And this is what happens almost every time. Disregarding who is actually flying the airplane at the time. You have an engine failure or something going on. The captain will look at me, the first officer, and say, "Jeff, you have the airplane, set me up on a 20-mile final, blah, blah, blah," just kind of instructing me how to position the airplane to come back for this emergency. And then he looks over at the flight engineer and he goes, Jim and I are going to be working this emergency procedure together. So the captain and the flight engineer are just like assholes and elbows, just like checklists flying. And this is back before we had, iPads, all these pieces of paper everywhere. And I'm just sitting up there going, thinking, I'm glad I'm not one of those guys, because all I have to do is just fly the airplane and let them just go, screw themselves into the ceiling.
Well, but can't that get a little hairy too if it's a vital system that's failing and they're trying to figure it out, isn't it a little bit more of a struggle?
Yeah, you have to pay attention, and maybe there might be something requiring a little bit more effort to actually fly the airplane, but usually not the case. Usually it's just you almost are ignored. Just like when you're doing the oral before you even go down into the box, you're just kind of ignored as the first officer, which is good. I love that. I like, just don't mind me. I'm just going to sit over here in the corner. Don't ask me any questions. I'm just doing my thing. Just whatever you want me to do, that's what I'm going to do. So I did that for 7 years. So it was awesome. I can't think of a better job, unless you get into a bigger airplane that has a 3-person crew, and you're the first officer in that, which is what I did after I did the 727 for 7 years as a first officer. I jumped to the L-1011 Lockheed TriStar.
So cool.
As a first officer in that. And again, same situation. I'm the first officer. I fly the airplane or I talk on the radios, just alternate between those two things. And you get paid more. And you get to go to like Hawaii and depending on, at the time, they were kind of starting to transition a lot of the European and Asian trips to the brand spanking new 767s, the 767 extended range airplanes and that kind of thing were taking over that world. And so the L-1011 was pretty much relegated to doing the Hawaii stuff out of Atlanta, or domestic flying, which actually... For 2 years of those 3, I was doing domestic flying, and that was probably the best The best time that I had at Delta was being a first officer flying domestically on the L-1011, mostly from Atlanta to Los Angeles.
Cool.
My family moved back out to California when I was in college, and so they were living in Southern California. And so I'd go out to L.A., they'd pick me up from the airport. We'd have dinner. We'd sit in the hot tub in the backyard. And then the next morning, they'd drive me to the Los Angeles International Airport for my one leg back home to Atlanta.
Man, that's cool.
Wow. It was a dream. It was wonderful. Anyway, so did that for three, the first two domestic and then the last international, which was just Hawaii. And then I thought to myself, I'm getting to that point now in my career, about the 12-year mark, that I should be thinking about upgrading. And they were talking about retiring the L-1011, starting to do that. And I'm thinking, and they were also talking about the 727 retirement schedule. And I'm thinking, well, I want to fly. I want to check out as a captain in something I've flown. Well, I've only flown two things here at Delta. One is the 727 and one's the L-1011. And I'm not going to upgrade to captain on the L-1011. I mean, that was the queen of the fleet at the time. Only the super senior guys were captains on that. That wasn't happening. So I'm thinking, I think that I have enough seniority where I can upgrade to the 727. So that's what I did. And so I was on that just shy of 2 years as a captain. And again, it was so nice because I already knew that airplane. I knew all the systems, being a flight engineer. I'd flown it for 7 years as a first officer. The only thing I had to do was switch, hands from on the yoke and the throttles, from this to that. And you'd think that would be a difficult thing to do, but it's not. And then, I had to learn how to steer the airplane on the ground because the steering tiller on the 727 was only on the captain's side.
Okay.
And that's it. So it was great. Flew that while I was a captain on that when September 11th occurred, 2001.
That's wild.
Yeah. So that is...
What was that experience like?
Well, for me, I wasn't flying at the time. I was on a trip. I'd gotten into Nashville the late night before. So I guess that would have been Monday night. I think it happened on a Tuesday, Tuesday morning. And so I think we weren't supposed to pick up from the hotel. We were right next to Vanderbilt University at a Holiday Inn. And we weren't supposed to have a pickup time until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, that was nice. Didn't have to worry about setting an alarm or anything. So I just got up at my normal, whenever I wake up in the morning on Tuesday morning, and I do my normal routine, turn the TV on, see what's going on in the world. And of course, presented with this, tower on fire in New York. I'm going, oh, that's no good. And they have a guy that they're interviewing talking about the fact that he thought it was like a light twin that somehow flew into the building. And I'm thinking, the weather was amazingly clear. How do you fly into a big giant building like that without seeing it? I'm really not thinking about that so much. I'm thinking about the fact that there's this huge fire, all these people above that floor. How are they going to get those people out of there, off that building?
Right.
And I guess in my mind, I'm thinking maybe they'll fly an airplane with that fire retardant stuff and drop that. So when I'm looking at the coverage of this and I see from the right frame this airplane coming into view, I'm thinking, oh, there it is. It's going to come over here and drop the fire retardant on the building. And then, of course, we know, no, it hit the other building. And that wasn't I thought it was a 737. It was a 767.
God,
hit the other
crazy.
tower. And then I went, oh, okay. Everybody, I think, at that moment goes, okay, now this changes everything. Now we understand what's happening. And so I was at the hotel in Nashville until Friday, so just a few days off and hanging out with other crews and just experiencing everything that we experienced during 9/11.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, it was. But anyway, so the retirement had already slowly started of the 727, but when September 11th hit, that's when the people that make decisions like this said, yeah, we're going to accelerate the retirement of the 727 a little bit faster because, the airline was already kind of suffering a little bit. All the airlines were before September 11th. They were all kind of bleeding a little bit, a lot of money, and not doing so well. And of course, September 11th was just like the final hatchet. Like, okay,
Sure.
Everybody's really going to suffer now. So I was the second group that was displaced from my position on the 727, and so what they do, at least most of the U.S. airlines, and especially the major U.S. airlines, is when they have surpluses on a certain position at a certain base. In other words, too many pilots in that position.
Right.
They basically say, they give you a notice that you're going to be displaced. Which means that now I can look at what's available and I can kind of put my displacement preferences in for kind of like a wish list or whatever going back to the military days. Like, okay, what is it you want to do if you get bumped off of that? And so I'm thinking, well, I like being a captain now. I like being in charge of the environment. Not that I was like, oh yeah, I'm in charge. Look at me. It was more like I can control how the environment is, and let's have, I'd always say, let's have fun. Let's do everything we're supposed to do. Let's don't screw anything up.
Sure.
If I screw something up, then we all have screwed something up. So keep me out of trouble. Let's have fun. And the only reason why we won't be having fun is maybe like bad weather or some kind of an abnormal, emergency situation. Otherwise, let's don't make this a job. Let's make this just fun.
That's great.
So that's the kind of environment that I had when I was a captain. And I liked that. And I didn't want to go back to being the first officer and then trying to figure out if this is a grumpy captain or is a fun captain to fly with and whatever.
Sure.
Are we going to fly right through the middle of that thunderstorm, or are we going to go around it? I didn't like not really knowing sometimes flying with some of these guys. Yeah. And so I know, hey, I'm in charge. I look at that thunderstorm and I go, nope. We're not even going to get close to that thing. We're going to take a nice wide berth around that. And so anyway, I like that. So the only thing I could fly captain on in Atlanta, because I didn't want to commute to any of our other bases in the system, because I just liked living in the same town that where I'm based. And so it just means driving your car down to the airport. And I like that. And so the only thing at the time that I could fly and still be a captain was the Mad Dog, the McDonnell Douglas MD-88, and that's a variant of the DC-9, a modern variant. And that's why I said, never say never. I said I never wanted to fly the DC-9. Technically, I never did fly the DC-9. Although, if you look at my airline transport pilot certificate and you look at my type ratings, I have two, 727 and DC-9. And they said, well, Jeff, you never flew the DC-9. Well, I know, but the McDonnell Douglas products, the Boeing 717, they all fall under the category for the type rating of a DC-9. So
interesting.
That's what I ended up doing. And I thought, I'll just do this for as long as I need to and then get off of it. Maybe go to the 737 or something like that. And so I started flying it, and I'm thinking, well, it's not so bad, especially being a captain. You're the first officer is doing all the work on these airplanes. And I'm just sitting there, looking pretty and acting like I'm in charge, and making decisions and that kind of thing. So I'm thinking, this is pretty easy. The trips are pretty much the same as the trips that I was flying in the 727. Maybe I'll hang out here a little bit longer. This is not bad. And then I started getting seniority, and then I started getting super seniority. And I went, that's what all these people have been talking about all these years. Because you'd hear people talk about seniority and how great it is to have seniority, but until you actually get to experience it, you really can't appreciate it. I mean, you understand the theory of it, but you really don't get it until you get it. And then you go, now I understand what these people have been talking about. And so for a lot of us, once you get that seniority, you don't want to give up seniority.
Sure.
So I said, well, I'm just going to stay on this airplane for as long as I can until I have decent seniority on another fleet. Oh, I never left that airplane because I was in the top 10 guys, captains in Atlanta on the airplane. I think there were like 400, 500 of us.
That's wild.
So I could pick and choose what trips I want to fly. I mean, it had a lot of flexibility.
That's awesome.
Vacations, I never had to fly over Christmas. I mean, there were several years where I took off from Thanksgiving until early January. And that was, I used my entire vacation period, and I was home for Christmas. It was wonderful. And so finally, we fast forward to COVID, the pandemic. And the same kind of thing happened with the Mad Dog that happened with the 727. They'd already kind of decided to start retiring the thing, but then they really rapidly retired it and said, we're going to get rid of this thing. Next year, this time, there aren't going to be any more McDonnell Douglas MD-88s, MD-90s at Delta Airlines. They're going to all be gone. And so I stayed on the thing until the very bitter end, June of 2020, I think, was when the last flights took place. And I was off for about 4 months. And I think the biggest regret that I have, James, in my career is when I made the decision, again, it was a situation where I could put in a preference for the airplane that I wanted displaced to. Mm-hmm. I was thinking that the Boeing 717, which is really a McDonnell Douglas MD-95, but Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, so they put their naming system on it, Boeing 717. I thought, well, I've been flying the Mad Dog for 18 years and over 12,000 hours. I know this thing like the back of my hand. That's going to be a nice, easy transition to fly the Boeing 717. I was wrong because that airplane all the avionics were completely different. The box, the flight management system, computer, the brains was completely different. It was more like an Airbus, apparently. I don't know. I've never flown an Airbus, but they tell me that it was much more like an Airbus. And I was in training on that. And now, I'm only a few years away from retirement. I'm in my 60s now. And, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing. My brain wasn't working like it did when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s, even 50s. It's like everything was a little bit more difficult for me to pick up and learn. And I remember in the initial part of that training, I raised my hand and said, is it too late for me to do that special program that we have that allows me to retire now and you pay me a certain number of hours per month? And they go, yeah, you had to make that decision about 6 months ago, Jeff. I'm like, oh, okay. I put my hand down. I went, okay, back into the books, try to figure this out. Anyway, the regret that I have is that I should have bid for the 757, 767. I could have spent the rest of my career flying that amazing airplane, the Boeing 757. Domestically, I would have had decent seniority on it. And the presentation that I would have had as far as my instruments and avionics and that kind of thing is something that I'm very, very familiar with. It would have been almost identical to what I was used to in the Mad Dog. The box was very similar. My life would have been so much easier if I'd just done that, and I would have made more money too. But for me in the airlines, it wasn't all about the money, because you'll probably ask the question, well, Jeff, I mean, you must have been pretty dang senior in the entire seniority list at Delta. Why didn't you fly, some of these long haul kind of jets that have layovers in London and Rome and Paris and all these wonderful places that you can have a layover? Well, when I was a first officer flying the Hawaii stuff back several years before, I'd walk around on my layover in Waikiki and Honolulu and like with brain fog, like I don't know, you kept shaking my head trying to start thinking straight because of the time zone changes and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, I don't like this feeling. I don't feel like I'm sharp. I feel like my brain is dull. And
interesting.
I'm a first officer right now, and I'm getting ready to check out as a captain. And I don't want to be a captain in charge of the whole operation and all these passengers making good decisions with brain fog. And I'm thinking maybe just the long haul lifestyle is just not for me. So I made my decision at that point that when I checked out as a captain, I would stay in the domestic realm and fly narrow bodies and fly the trips from Atlanta to Jackson, Mississippi, or Atlanta to Memphis, or Nashville, and we went into big airports too. We went to Washington, D.C.A. We went to LaGuardia, Boston, Miami, all the bigger airports around the system as well. But it was a nice mix of little podunk cities and big giant metropolises. So it was a nice variety of different airport experiences, and I enjoyed it. And
that's awesome.
Every trip was at least, a 3-day trip was typically a 3-leg day, 2-leg day, 3-leg day if you're senior enough. If you're not so senior, a 3-leg day, 4-leg day, 3-leg day. But let's say it's the first one that I mentioned, 8 legs. 4 of those are going to be my takeoff and my landing, because we alternate between first officer and captain generally. Right. So there's a requirement that to keep up our landing currency that we have to get 3 takeoffs and 3 landings every 90 days. And the guys that are out there flying the long haul stuff, they're fighting each other almost to get a landing so they can keep their landing currency, because they fly these 1-leg 8-hour, 10-hour flights, and then they have 3 or 4 pilots on there, and you're only get on the trip, you may only get 2 takeoffs and 2 landings for the entire 3-day trip. So they're always trying to manage all that. And I'm thinking, I just go fly 1 3-day trip and I've gotten my currency for the next 90 days. So I'm constantly in landing currency, no problem. So that was nice. And the fact that most of the fun, to me, most of the fun of flying was at the actual takeoff, climb out, and then descent, approach, landing. That was the fun part of doing. And pretty much these shorter haul kind of flights, that's mostly what you do. You're not at cruise altitude for very long, depending on where you're going. So it's a lot of action, a lot of landing, a lot of hands-on flying. That's too cool. Which I really liked. Yeah. So, and that's why I wanted to do this job, is to actually fly airplanes. And so that's why. So when I ended up retiring, out of the system seniority number that I had was just shy of 200 out of over 16,000 pilots. So I was pretty senior. Never made it to number 1. Although I was number 1 on the Boeing 717, the fleet that I was assigned, for my last few years. I was the number 1 captain for quite a while. Wow. And that was very nice to have the ability to. It was almost daunting because, like, if you do something, you're assigned something that you didn't really want to do, it was like your fault because you're the number 1 captain. You're the one that screwed it up, Jeff. Like, you didn't look at this trip very well, But anyway, so yeah, being super senior on a fleet really is a nice, very nice.
Yeah, and I can just imagine all the things you've seen and up in the air, and we've run a little bit long. So we're going to have to cut it short.
You knew,
no.
You knew that would happen, right?
I did. And if I didn't have another podcast coming up in a few minutes, I would absolutely keep going. But I have to call it. And it's very unfortunate. But to that note, I have so many more questions. And there's still 2 major topics that we haven't even talked about yet that I want to discuss later. So I'm going to save that.
I'll come back.
Hopefully we'll either do this again or if you happen to be in the neighborhood and come stay with us, then we'll do it here in the studio.
I'd love to.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. And that was great conversation. I loved your stories. They're so good. And I know that my listeners are going to have some questions, and I know that Sarah has more questions. I also wanted to tell you, Sarah and I are probably going to plan a trip maybe next summer out to your neck of the woods for a good week or so, and we would love to get together with you a couple times at least.
Oh, absolutely. I expect to.
Okay, great. Okay, well, this has been another one. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Captain Jeff, for your time. Real quick before we get out of here, I want you to do your social medias spiel, because Captain Jeff, if you didn't know, has arguably the best aviation podcast out there, definitely one of the biggest, and he's built this amazing community. So, if you're at all interested or fascinated with aviation, please give it a listen. And Captain Jeff, tell them where they can find
That's the best part of it is the community, honestly. But we do the show because we have fun and just hanging out with friends and talking aviation mostly. Anything, so we're on YouTube, Airline Pilot Guy, all one word. We're on X, Airline Pilot Guy, or APG Crew, APG for Airline Pilot Guy and the crew. So that's all of us on X. And let's see, what else do we do? We do that, X. Facebook, we're Airline Pilot Guy, all one word. So basically, most of the social medias out there, just put in Airline Pilot Guy and you'll find us.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you again so much for your time, and I really look forward to doing this again. I still have so many freaking questions. We could talk for hours and hours.
Sorry. See, I'm sorry. Like once I get going, it's hard to shut me up. No,
please don't apologize. It was great. This is exactly what I was looking for, so I really appreciate it. All right, Captain Jeff, we will talk to you very soon, and all of you guys, subscribe, come back, join us for the next one, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Okay. Oh,
beautiful.
Switched cameras on you. Hold on.
That's a nice doorknob there.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, there we go.